Bop about the tabletop super show. Bop about the tabletop super show.
Have you ever needed to base a model fast to get it onto the tabletop, but you want it to look good at the same time? If that's the case, then today's episode's for you. Today, I'm going to show you guys my dry on wet texture paste basing technique, which is a no paint, no glue, no fuss, no muss, one and done system for getting good looking based models onto the tabletop. In fact, looking almost better than they have any right to for the amount of time that it takes to accomplish this. So, a few things for today. We're going to be using stuff like the ground nutshells, Army Painter Battleground. We're going to be using these decomposed granites in varying colors so that we get some different variety in the bases. And then we're also going to be using, to adhere all this stuff to it, a couple of texture pastes. We're going to be using dark earth from Vallejo and brown earth. And we're going to actually mix these two together to get a highlight, a shade, and then the mixed is going to be the mid-tone. Another thing I want to tell you guys about is that this is for your flat bases. This is not like flat bases like this, like your sladas, your round flats, and your hex bases. Not for your models that have texture and FDM printed molding and stuff like that. There's something else I want to show you is that this is the finished product. I want to show you guys that it sticks onto there really well once it's completely set up. One other thing I wanted to mention was while I was filming this, there was a few seconds and a few places where my hobby handle and the model went out of frame, but I decided to leave the video in its entirety because I was explaining the process while I was doing it. Anyways, I really hope you guys enjoy today's episode, and let's go ahead and get into the meat of it. Okay guys, so I'm going to show you guys my dry on wet texture paste basing technique using natural basing. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be taking texture paste and we're going to be adding some of these different colored decomposed granites, some different colored walnut seeds, and then a couple rocks so that we can achieve something that looks like this when we're at the end of it, which is just my tabletop ready and tabletop ready plus standard board basing. We're going to be using this 3D printed mech that a friend of mine printed up for a Battletech game. I believe that this is a spider. Anyways, this is just kind of my tabletop, kind of just ready to go tabletop standard for a resin print. And we're also going to be using, to start, a couple of texture pastes. These are both by Vallejo. We're going to be using brown earth and dark earth. So we're going to start by getting some dark earth onto this palette down here that has all of our little rocks and things that we're going to be putting on. So let's get some of this stuff out. Let's get the bigger one. You can use any kind of small metal spatula to do this. It's always better to have a little extra, because what we're going to do is we're going to take this and the brown earth, and then we're actually going to mix the two together on the palette. And we're going to use, just to kind of create some different hued striations in the dirt to create kind of a, give it some personality and create a cool looking base that won't detract too much from the model that you've just painted. So my idea behind the basing is it's quick. You don't need glue. You can do this right at once, and it creates a base that's nice enough that it looks good on its own, but also doesn't detract from the model that you've painted. So let's get the tops back on these. So let's take some of this texture. We're going to mix some of it together. And then I'm going to zoom in on so that you guys can see the miniature a little bit better. See, now I've created a shadow, mid-tone, and a highlight with the paste. And the idea behind this is that you aren't going to cover this base entirely. Some of this dirt's going to show through. Okay, here's our model. So we're going to start with the shadow, which we're going to be putting right kind of under his legs to kind of create a shadow. That's it. You just kind of scrape it on. Let's get a little more. And even a little more. You want it to, you don't want too much on it. You don't want it to be mud-like.
unless you want unless you want it to be mud-like and then go a little thicker. But you do want it to have enough of this paste on there so that it kind of adheres to the materials will adhere to the base. Let's get some of this that we mixed up. Get a good amount this time. We're just kind of going around. Here's a little too much. And don't worry if you get a little bit on the feet or anything, because you can actually go back with a wet brush and just clean that up, which I'll show you guys in a minute. Okay, now we want a little bit of the highlight color here as well. Okay. For the purposes of this, I'm not going to really worry about, see, like I got a little bit on there. You just take a wet brush when you do that. You can use your finger too. I mean, even, it's fine. And get a little bit off. It also creates kind of a cool effect for mechs and stuff like this to have a little bit of stuff on their feet. Because once this dries, it doesn't look like mud anymore. It looks more like just dirt and earth. So the idea behind this is to work this base up while it's wet. So to do that, you get your material on here carefully, clean your tool off so that this stuff doesn't cake on. And then we're going to get, when you're doing this dry on wet technique, you're going to want to start with the larger stuff first. So let's get a rock on here. Kind of push it in. Okay, get another rock. You want to work with the larger pieces first, because later on that's going to be a lot harder to adhere. And we'll start with just we'll get some of these chips from the Army Painter next. Add a few, kind of sprinkling it on to the base. Add a few of these walnuts. Same thing. Add a little bit on there. We're going to get a couple little chips from this gray decomposed granite, little bit of chips from this more yellowish one. I mean, you can get this kind of dirt. You can go get different kinds of dirt and just, like, you know, microwave or heat the dirt up so that it doesn't have any bacteria and stuff on it. And you can just use whatever, or you can go to your local rock supply or brick place, and they generally will have some different kinds of different colored decomposed granites that you can use to achieve this. So, kind of shake the little excess off while it's still wet. Now we're going to get down to the powdery stuff. So, you go to the powder last, because once you've got the powder down, the larger pieces will no longer adhere to the texture paste. And I mean, the texture paste is just like concrete once it sets up. So any of these pieces that are on there are going to be on there for good. Let's get some. It's going to create some interest. And like I said, you don't want to cover the base entirely. You want to just get it just right. And one other thing you can do with this kind of stuff is you can add a few tufts, which we'll do here once it's dried. You can add the tufts wet too if you leave a little bit of area. So there you have it, about 6-7 minutes, and we got a pretty nice looking no paint, no glue base that's going to have all these pieces pretty much stick on in perpetuity, as long as you aren't bouncing the model off of walls or anything. So there you go. From here, we're going to go on to the wrap up, and we'll see you guys there.
So that's going to do it for this episode, guys. If you got any enjoyment out of this, please grab your unused basing glue and take the like button and adhere it to the bottom of a deep well right before a major thunderstorm. As always, feel free to subscribe to the channel so that you don't miss any of our uploaded content. And I really hope to see you guys in the next time. Until then, adieu.